So I was talking to my wife, April. What should I do? I don't want to do the normal thing on my Kent presentation. And she said,
Why don't you talk about what you're passionate about right now?
there are 12 of our Kent friends in the cartoon above. The majority of them are on this phone call. So, if you're ready to go for a ride, let's buckle up and go.
You've got mail. Hello, Basil.
Well, hello, Austin. It looks like you're driving up to the girls' school. I'm afraid I've got a bit of bad news for you. They closed that campus 30 years ago. Okay, on to something serious. My name, Basil. Not Basil. Not Basil. Drives me crazy, okay? Let's discuss it.
In today's episode, I'm going to be teaching you how the Brits pronounce this word. Of course, here in America, it's very much pronounced basil, like the word hazel. Now, where I'm from, it's quite like the name from Fawlty Towers. We pronounce it Basil, as in Basil Fawlty.
Basil? Basil! 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 Basil!
I was a kid with a dog and a fort, and I was lucky enough to meet Santa Claus, all growing up in Princeton, New Jersey. In 1959, Pee Wee hockey was new to the United States, so I joined my first team called the Maple Leafs, and at that point, I was headed for my lifelong career. I was going to the NHL. I was a horrible student. I had attention deficit disorder, which I didn't realize and have diagnosed until it got diagnosed in my own kids. But it was hard to study. So anyway, my parents wanted to send me to boarding school. My father went to St. Paul's. And in those days, they had a first form. And so I would apply every year. And of course, I get the rejection letter. I remember my father saying to me, "Son, you're not going to skate your way into boarding school." So in 1968, I was in 10th grade at Princeton Day School. I was playing varsity hockey. Special trip for us every year was to go up and play Taft and Kent. Went up that year and played Taft, and then we went over to play Kent. Wally Shue was the captain of the team. We had a tea in the headmaster's study afterwards, and I'm sitting there talking to Wally. He says, "Oh, you want to go? Think you'd like to go to Kent?" Well, I don't know. He says, "Well, I'll bring the coach over." And so Pete Bragdon comes over to talk to me. He says, "You want to go to Kent?" I go, "Sure." So next thing I know, I'm coming for an interview, and so I have an interview with Jeff Fleischman. Basically, they say, "Yeah, you're not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but if you stay back a year, hey, we'd love to have you come play hockey here." My family was pretty darn dysfunctional. So the opportunity to go to Kent, well, I jumped at the chance. So the picture above here is the 1968-69 season, my first year on the Kent team with Eric Jackson as cap. 35 years later, I'm playing in the over 50 tournament in Tampa, Florida. These are all friends of mine that I grew up with in Princeton that I played against. I also played against John Rooney and a bunch of other guys from Kent. But hey, Pete, I hope you're proud of me. Check this out. My team won the tournament. Got this cool trophy from Labatt's. Awesome, huh? Woohoo! So the Betts family has this incredible camp up on 7th Lake in the Adirondack. You all remember Bob and Al, don't you? April and I were invited to visit the Betts camp in the Adirondacks a few years ago. The furniture in the main cottage must be 75 to 100 years old. And April took inspiration from the artwork on the lampshades and some of the pillows. April went on to design and produce some pillows and tea towels and other products using those designs. When we were at Kent, Butchie Betts was a fixture at every sporting event her kids were in. Going back as alumni, we'd see her watching her grandchildren. So we gave Butchie a bunch of product that we produced. I stopped by the camp a year later a week before Butchie died, and here she is holding up one of those pillows with Al. Well, thank you for agreeing to this to do this interview. You don't mind if I call you Basil, do you? Of course I mind. My name's Basil. What are you, some kind of moron? Righto, okay. Well, let's get right down to it. Now, there must be a story behind you and Vinny and these crazy croquet costumes you've come up with over the last 3 reunions. Well, I think Vin remembers it better than me. Why don't we ask him? So, Vin, you remember the story of togas at the very first inaugural croquet match? You remember that story?
Baz, I remember it very well.
Good, good. Well,
We were having lunch, and Terry was organizing the croquet match, and everyone was wearing whites but you and I. And he came up to us and said, "Where's our whites?" And we looked at each other, and we didn't have any. And he said, "Well, that's not fair. I'm working my ass off here to have a croquet tournament, and you guys are goofing around. What kind of friends are you?" So we kind of felt guilty, and we talked about it. We ran up to the dorm room, grabbed a couple sheets, ran to the boathouse, quickly redressed into togas, white togas, and out we came. Terry took one look at us, had a bright smile over his face, and he goes, "Once again, Stetson and Davis came through for me."
well, that was informative. I guess I'm curious, how did you come up with the idea to dress up as Mr. Natural at the last reunion? And what those costumes? Well, it's not easy to come up with a white costume for a croquet tournament. So you took inspiration from Mr. Natural? Well, of course we did. Don't you? So what's the story behind trucking, or keep on trucking? So what was going on in 69 and 70? Were you stuck under a rock? 50 years later, you're asking me what's going on with trucking? So tell me about the R. Crumb cartoons you modified before the last reunion. I love to communicate with humor. I really enjoyed getting people from all different classes and sticking their mugs on these funny characters that were doing these ridiculous things and putting them in funny situations.
Chips cashed in, keep trucking like the Doodah Man together. More or less in line, just keep trucking on. Arrows of neon and flashing marquees out on me.
Let me shift gears here. So, did you ever get caught sneaking up to the girls' school? Well, yes. So what were the circumstances? Well, it was my 5th form year in the spring. In fact, it was Parents' Weekend. A beautiful Saturday, warm night. And Jeff Fox and I went up to the girls' school and met our girlfriends out in a hayfield. So how did you get caught? Somehow Ted Morse found out about our adventure. I rode on the varsity crew that year, and I was at the picnic at Hart Perry's house when all of a sudden Ted Morse shows up and pulls me out. It was absolutely apoplectic and yelling at me. "Why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? Give me a good reason why I shouldn't turn you in." So why were you so sure that nothing was going to happen? Well, I was on the varsity crew, and I was one of Hart's boys. Years later, I ran into Hart Perry, and we had a good laugh about all of this. Well, thanks for taking the time for another interview. So I wanted to ask what else you're passionate about. Well, I'm crazy about motorcycle riding and surfing. You know, a bunch of your friends say you're immature and have a Peter Pan complex. Of course I have a Peter Pan complex. I have a 13-year-old brain stuck inside an almost 70-year-old body. You want to talk immature? Look at this guy.
I have a headache and my eyes hurt.
Seriously, aren't you a little old to be riding a motorcycle and surfing? You know, at some point I will be, but right now, I figure I'm healthy, and I'm going for it. I got a few years left. So what is it you like so much about motorcycling? Is you doing the biker gang thing on a Harley? You are dumber than a box of rocks, aren't you? Check this out, you big weenie. So I kind of get it. So what is it like to ride a motorcycle fast in a corner? What's it like? Well, I can tell you, if you've ever dreamed about flying an F-16, this is the closest you can get to it on the ground. Sometimes I'm out there and it's like time slows down. Everything starts moving in slow motion. When you take a corner right at high speed, there's an incredible feeling of weightlessness. Let's switch gears here. Pun intended, haha. Oh, it's Terry Thorne. Basil here. Uh-huh. Yeah, okay. I got it. I'll tell him. Tell me what? What? Well, he said, tell Basso he's out of time on his video now. He wants you to include video of Vin napping and Peter and Vinny drinking see-through. So, Basil, tell me about surfing in Panama in 1 minute. We live on an island in the town of Bocas del Toro. This is our house. That's our boathouse. Every morning in the dark, I go out, I get in my boat, and I drive around the corner to the other side of our island. It takes about 5 minutes, and I go surfing. And here's an image of where all the surf breaks are, close to our house. I surf for about 3 hours and I come home exhausted. And then I find these two knuckleheads who are visiting me, Peter and Vinny, and they've been drinking see-throughs. See-throughs as in martinis made with vodka that you can see through. They start at 10, and look what happens to them not long after. So, you say your name is Basil, but how come Terry Thorne calls you Basso? Well, duh. The guy's got learning disabilities and a speech impediment, so of course he can't pronounce my name. So, Basil, I have to say this is one of the worst interviews I've ever conducted. Okay, asshole. That's it. I'm gonna kick your ass. Ow! Oh, please don't hurt me! He went that way. One asshole we don't have to deal with anymore. Most of this movie is about motorcycling, and I ran out of time, so I didn't get to do the rest, but you know, I want to give a shout out to our friend Bobby Gauthier, who died in the last year. Got a picture of him here when he and I rode to the last reunion at Kent together.